Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Vedic Conversation, where we invite our guests to talk about a number of different topics through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but still very much relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Anthony Thompson, a Vedic meditation teacher based in London, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Derrick Yanford in New York and Rory Kinsella in Sydney. In this episode, our guest is Théo Burkhardt, a colleague based on the west coast of the States. Theo firmly believes that knowledge is for action and is interested in some of the more refined aspects of meditation. He has a passion for literature and language, which is evident in his podcast, Slouching Towards Enlightenment, which he co-hosts with Brienne Rose, and this underlines much of his approach to meditation. He gives some very interesting views about jyotish, Vedic astrology, being used for spiritual evolution. This is rarely talked about, and he clears up misunderstandings about what it is and clarifies how to use it properly. This, together with his interest in Vedic philosophy and Danya Veda, Vedic martial arts, and the use of bows and arrows, makes for a fascinating and powerful episode. Let's get into the conversation. And don't forget to stick around until the end, where we'll share with you how you can become involved in the conversation. Welcome to the show, Theo.
Thank you. And Anthony, I'd like you to announce me wherever I go now for the rest of my life. That was so suave and enjoyable.
Well, thank you.
If, for instance, if someone invites me over for dinner, I want you to enter first. Drop that, and then I'll walk in.
Oh dear, I'm blushing. Thank you. Well, it's great. It's great to have you here. It's great to have you. So, you're in Aspen, and when I spoke to you just a couple of days ago, or you left me a message rather, you were traveling up to Aspen, and I know that you spend quite a bit of time moving around the country. And I'd be fascinated to know, you're obviously meeting the demand of the times, that there are people out there that you're recognizing would like to learn Vedic meditation. Do you find moving swiftly from city to city satisfying? There must be some challenges to that, but it also must have some logistical issues in terms of keeping tabs on your students and making sure that they're fully supported.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different kind of initiator's lifestyle. I have a lot of colleagues who, they just set up shop and they're very reliable with their group meditations and Veda classes and things like that. But that, even though I have that as well, I just feel the urge to move. And so I started off traveling a lot. I grew up on both coasts, in LA and New York. So I immediately have two separate clienteles and have been teaching in both places. And I just kept saying yes to wherever I was invited. And if I ever wanted to visit someplace, like, I don't know, wherever, I would think, I'm going to go there and then I'll teach. And after a while, it just became kind of a thing. You would say, oh, Theo will go. And they're usually right.
Yeah.
And I do like this. I really like the idea of being in one place and really nurturing a community. I think that's important, and I think that's what needs to be done for the most part. But I'm a little like Johnny Appleseed. I'm going around Apple Bija, and throwing mantras in people's heads in different towns where there are no initiators.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for that as well. But this last 3 months have been very exhausting. I'm ready to get back to, I live in Santa Fe now, actually. I still teach quite a bit in Los Angeles. So I'm just here in Aspen for a few days, meeting up with some students and teaching. I was in New York on Sunday, and I got in my car and drove from New York to Toledo on one day, Toledo to Lincoln the other, and then I was in Estes Park, Colorado last night, and now here I am in Aspen for the next few days, and then Saturday back home to Santa Fe.
Wow. So you're really putting in the mileage.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Do you enjoy the aspect of kind of, are you traveling alone, if I may ask? Are you?
I'm traveling alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I drove out to Woodstock in April, I drove out with both of my dads, my dad and my stepdad, which was it's like the premise for an indie movie, you know.
I was
But
following it on
and
Instagram.
it
It
was
seemed interesting.
yeah, it was about as boring as an indie movie. Or I shouldn't say boring. It just wasn't dramatic in any sort of way that you would hope. But it was beautiful. It was really cool to do that. And I do enjoy traveling. I really like. It's sort of in my makeup. I need to move. I need to go places. I like being places that are new. I like being in a city and not knowing what I'm doing and where I am. I think that's exhilarating, and I like finding out about places. So even though I've done things where I thought, well, I'm going to go to Providence, Rhode Island, and teach, and haven't taught anyone. That happens too. You go someplace and no one shows up, and then other places you go there and you start a community. And like Aspen, I went a couple of years ago, and now I have a bunch of students here, and they're all absolutely lovely. And they always ask for me to come back. And Aspen, it's a very easy place to visit. Very beautiful here.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now, you have a podcast with the very intriguing title "Slouching Towards Enlightenment,"
Yes.
which you co-host with Brienne
Rose, yes.
Brienne Rose, and I love the style of that because it's very relaxed, it's very informative, and there's this kind of stream of consciousness, but underpinned by your very deep and profound knowledge of the Vedas and all matters Vedic. And I'd be very interested to know when you started to get into that, because obviously you've been studying quite a lot on your own, as well as listening to our teachers and Tom Knowles, our main guru. But when did that start, and what was it that kind of tickled your interest?
You mean when did the knowledge start or the podcast?
The knowledge.
The knowledge. So I learned with Tom. Tom has taught me everything. And if something comes out of my mouth that is incorrect or untrue, then I probably didn't learn it from him. I'm probably just making shit up. But I was lucky enough to learn with Tom in a private course, which I was invited to, and I didn't know who he was, and I found him very interesting. And I was in a place in my life, like most people are when they learn to meditate. People learn at really crucial times of their life, where they're, a lot of people learn when they're in crisis. A lot of people learn during a major life event or life shift. And I was in one of those. I was in crisis mode, and there was a huge shift going on in my life, and I was lucky enough to be invited to this thing. So I went and learned, and I just found I was very suspicious of him, very suspicious, and I even like I said in my podcast, I kind of felt sorry for the guy, to be honest. I thought being a meditation teacher was probably about the stupidest career choice I'd ever heard of. I thought, he has to I just had no, it was, and this is a report, like, as you know, this is a report on my state of consciousness at the time. That's how I was approaching it. Like, this guy's a shyster, this isn't going to work. But it did work. And 9 years of insomnia stopped that night, and I started sleeping again. So he had my undivided attention the next day, and massive respect. And then, after that, a couple weeks later, or 2 or 3 weeks later or something, I went to my first group meditation, and I just listened to him, and I thought, I'm never going to miss another one of these. So back then, he would come to LA, and he would be there for 2 weeks and offer 3 different times, 7 a.m., 11 a.m., and 7 p.m., and have these big courses. And he'd do that 2 weeks in a row. I would be at every single class because I just thought I don't ever want to forget this. That I just thought I didn't want to lose this valuable knowledge. So I wasn't thinking I'm going to become like Tom or anything like that. I just thought I'm holding on to this knowledge for dear life, and I just found myself watching him because when I watch people for a long time, I start to imitate them. It's maybe that's an actor thing. Maybe that's I grew up with a bunch of funny people, and I've always surrounded myself with very funny actors or comedians. I teach a lot of comedians, but there's some people have that need to just mimic people, and I found myself watching him and kind of like trying out in my head like things he was saying, and I do a great Tom impression. But I just wanted to, and after a while, once I started teaching, I just watched him like a hawk. I just showed up for everything he lectured at and really wanted to integrate. I didn't know if I was or not, but now the joy of a teacher is being asked a question and the intellect goes, Jesus, I don't know the answer to that. And suddenly it wells up and out it comes out of your mouth. And you're just letting it happen and you're listening and thinking, this is pretty good. This is right. It's flowing. You're not making anything up. You're not getting in the way of it anymore. And teaching is so wonderful that way. It's wonderful to hear the knowledge come out through your own lens, through your own filter, or take shape by your words or your personality. And you're kind of just watching it going, I got to write that down. That's pretty interesting. I hope I don't forget that. And people all the time tell me, they'll say, oh, what you said on my podcast, what you said on your podcast really meant a lot to me. And I think, oh shit, I don't know. What did I say? I'm sure you guys get that too, like, oh, that meant so much. Because of that, I divorced my husband. And you're like, what? What the hell was it? Follow a charm? I just really enjoy being a teacher, and any knowledge that I have is, you go straight up the line. Tom Maharishi, Guru Dev. I have just been trying to collect it and integrate it, and the way to integrate knowledge is to put it to use. And that's what I would say. That's to anybody who's becoming a teacher or anybody who is a meditator who really wants to learn it. You have to put it into action because knowledge is for action. And for a long time, I was hearing this knowledge, but kind of wasn't doing anything about it. If you know what I mean? Just implementing it in very small, safe ways. But then once I became a teacher, I thought I need to really embrace certain aspects of it and really integrate this and really put it into action to see what happens. And I think that by putting the knowledge into action, and when you do, it feels a little risky, like you might lose all your money, or you might get people who are, suddenly mad at you, or you have to explain yourself or whatever. But I think that's how, because we all have the knowledge, but if you want it coming out of your mouth in such a way, you have to live it, put it into action wherever you can.
It takes a while to build up that confidence, doesn't it, as a teacher, that you feel that you have earned the right to stand in front of people and say what you're saying. But I totally agree with you about this feeling of it just kind of coming from somewhere, that you kind of feel you're put on the spot and then out it comes. But tell us, just to go back to your studying of the Vedas. I know that you're very interested in astrology and jyotish. Is that something that you have been always interested in and then switched into Vedic astrology, or?
No, I thought astrology was total bullshit, and there was a time where I was very condescending to people who believed in astrology. I just thought it was just horseshit. Oh yeah, the moon made you do it. That kind of thing. It's like, give me a break. But I got my chart read in LA by who was it? It was Michael Norris, and it was profound because it was as if he had the clip notes of my life, and that was very interesting. And also a little conversation that I had. Well, Tom had mentioned a couple things in a lecture in our initiator training that kind of got me thinking about astrology. Just I didn't fully embrace it. I just thought that's kind of interesting. And then when I got my first reading, I thought, okay, this is nuts. And Michael said, well, it's a science. It's not witchcraft. It's not, hocus pocus. This is a science, and it's something you can learn. And then I need to know things. I have to. I need to know how things work. That's what it is. I need to know how. If there's a mystery, I need it. I need to put light on it and understand the mechanics of it, so it's not a magic trick. I need to know how it works. So I got a book on jyotish called Hindu Astrology. There's some other title to it, but it was a big thick book. And Michael said this is probably the easiest way in, and it was like reading cuneiform. Like it would be easier to read Finnegan's Wake after a bottle of whiskey. I mean, it was impenetrable. You couldn't understand anything. And what I did is I always kept it around, and I would always leaf through it and slowly try and understand some principles. And then I started getting readings with my astrologer, Blaine Watson, who became my teacher. And he came up through Maharishi. He was taught Vedic astrology from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, so he speaks our language. And then I was reading Light on Life, and for a long time nothing made sense. But I just kept. My approach was that if I just because it can make you feel really stupid trying to study astrology. I don't know if everybody has that experience, but that was mine. I started studying, and I thought, all I'm doing is proving to myself how not smart I am. These are the thoughts you have when you try and study this thing. But I thought, okay, we'll do the dip, dye, and fade. So imagine like a white room that you want to paint dark blue, but all you have is light blue watercolor. You just coat after coat for the rest of your life. At some point, it's going to be opaque. And I thought if I use that approach, maybe 15, 20 minutes a day, maybe by 80, I'll be able to reach it. and that was my in. I just thought, there's no pressure. Just softly approach this and see what happens. And about after a year of that, I was doing it that way for a year, and then in the month of June of 2000, wow, I don't know when that was 2017 or 18. A bunch of stuff started to click, and then right after that, I went to Ecuador to study astrology with Blaine for a couple weeks, and then studied with Anand Malhotra and Rishikesh for a month. So I started getting sort of piecemealing it together, but I find astrology fascinating, especially if it's the scientific approach to it is what I find fascinating, because how is it that the planets being in certain areas of the sky at your moment of birth can predict all this, what's going to unfold after you're born. I wanted to know that, and I got answers, just by really applying myself, but not struggling to learn, just sort of really quietly trying to put it together. And then it's like the knowledge coming in this way met with something inside me, and there was I think a connection. And now I know how not good I am at it, by the way, because I know real astrologers, but in our community, I'm not bad at it.
You're very generous with it too, because I remember I asked you for some help or some insights, and you were very gracious and generous with your knowledge. I don't know whether Rory and Derrick have had jyotish readings, but
No,
I've had a
I was
few.
going to say for those who haven't had one, including me, what do people expect? I've got this idea of coming in and you'll say something and I won't be able to live my life normally because you'll have given me some big revelation.
No. It's, if anything, it's very. I think jyotish is very validating for people, and it's amazing how beneficial feeling validated is. You know, where maybe there's something that's always happened in your life, like a mistake that you always make or something, and then you see it's in your chart that it was never going to be any other way, and now you're letting yourself off the hook. It was in the stars. You know, there's something maybe that some past life karma that is, you know, like whenever I travel, I lose something. This has been happening to me my whole life. It's a thing. Turns out that you can see this in my chart. It has everything to do with moon in the 12th house aspected by Saturn. And now when I travel to exotic foreign places, I lose my wallet. I remember I lost it in Ireland. I went to Ireland with my family. They were all like, "Didn't you lose it the last time we were all here?" I said, yeah. And I had 15 family members search my room because they were all giving me shit. You know, you've done it again. It was on the first day too. So I had them all because I wanted to recruit them. I'm like, tear this room apart. They all did. It was found 3 months later in my room by a maid. But now they couldn't give me shit because they didn't see it. You know?
Hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, so it's like, it's interesting to, so if you got a chart reading, you would provide the astrologer with exact birth time and birth details, you know, place, time, birthday, that kind of thing. And then the astrologer takes that information and preps your chart. I have to prep. There's some astrologers who don't need to prep charts anymore. They're so good. I need some time with it to look up all the yogas, to put things together. And then we would FaceTime, and you would, you know, I would say, okay, you were born at this time, this place. The moon was in this nakshatra, you know, and it was this amount of full, it was waning or waxing. That's a tithi, and that all means something. In this sign, your rising sign is this. Your sun sign is this. In Vedic astrology, rising and moon are most important. Sun is tertiary. And that rising sign is a very important calculation because that's sort of who you are. But the moon sign is how you feel inside. It's mind and emotions. And the moon, there's 27 nakshatras. Western doesn't use this. Nakshatras are tiny constellations, and they'll be behind, you know, the 27 nakshatras wrap around the zodiac. So to get very accurate, when the moon's drifting from sign to sign, but also from nakshatra to nakshatra. Each nakshatra is owned by a planet. So when moon, let's say my moon, for instance, was in the constellation of Swati on July 22nd, 1969, when I was born in Glendale, that means I'm going to start my life in a Rahu cycle. Because Rahu, the north node of the moon, owns Swati. Now, we are in, all of us are in planetary cycles throughout our whole life. And we get passed from planet to planet to planet. And these planetary cycles, we can look at them as like karmic seasons. You know, if you're in a Saturn cycle, that's a season. That's a 19-year season of your life where there will be challenges. If they're, depending on also, where is Saturn in your chart? Is he exalted? Is he debilitated? Is he in a house he likes? Is he in a house that hates? Or like Rahu, where I was born in Swati, so I'm going to start it in Rahu. Rahu is in my 4th house, that's home. Rahu is very up and down, very bumpy. So a little bit of a bumpy childhood, except Rahu is in his own sign of Aquarius, so not as bumpy as normal. And then we can, through that, predict. We can look like if I'm in a like right now I'm in a Mercury Sun Moon cycle. So what you would do, what the astrologer does, is look at the chart and finds Mercury and Sun and Moon, and which houses are they in, and which signs do they own. Well, Mercury and Sun in my chart are together in the 9th house, which is the house of luck and also the house of travel. Moon, a travel planet, is also in a house of travel in the 12th house. And they own houses of travel. So this is a time where I'm traveling like crazy. And it will always kind of be that way. Now, if it wasn't COVID, I would probably be overseas, because this is overseas stuff, these houses. But we've had to rearrange our predictions just because of the nature. But I'm still all over the place and traveling like crazy. Does that make sense? So I would give you kind of like, most astrologers your first reading will kind of be an overview of your life. And then the following readings would be, let's look at the next year, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So kind of like with Ayurveda, where it's not rules, it's just saying this is your tendency, this is kind of what works for you. Is it that kind of thing where I go, oh, I'm allowed to be lazy or inquisitive, or so you kind of go, you stop fighting your tendencies. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's true to some extent. You do stop. I found that I stopped fighting my tendencies. There's nothing to be embarrassed about in your chart. That's one thing I know. There's nothing to be ashamed of in your chart. It's where you're at. People, they just have karma that they have to deal with, and the chart sort of illustrates what that karma is and when it's going to come up. And an astrology reading is like a weather report. It's going to rain, but you can say, actually, okay, I'm glad I know it's going to rain, but I'm not going to take the umbrella. I kind of want to get wet. So it gives you that knowledge of what's to come, and then you can do something about it or not. But the best astrology works best in terms of helping someone evolve spiritually. Most people use it for, when am I going to get married, or is he or she the right one for me? Or my astrologer works with the mob a lot, so they call him, and they all want to know one thing: am I going to jail in the next 6 months?
Is Joey a rat?
Yeah, is Joey a rat? Yeah, but it's interesting, and he might say, actually, yeah, it looks like something's coming up in a few months. I'm not telling you to skip town, but if you do, maybe you won't wind up in jail.
I'd love to go back to something you said earlier and maybe tie it back into what we're talking about now, in that, first of all, it seems like the way that you've come to knowledge is through skepticism, kind of going, not really sure about that, actually really don't think that's what it's about, and then having this aha and it being cracked wide open and leading you into an awareness that you didn't have before. But you had mentioned how most people come to meditation during crisis, and I think that you said that that was true for you. So if you wouldn't mind, or correct me if I'm wrong, would you share with us what crisis you were going through when you found meditation?
Yeah, I had Lyme disease in the early 2000s, and it was very debilitating. And during that time, I started trying different meditation practices, but I couldn't do any of them. They were very difficult, very unpleasant, and no perceivable benefits. So I do 10 minutes of mindfulness, and I was no better. You want to feel something. You know what I mean? You want to meditate, and then you want to come out of it and think, cool, that's that. I'm glad I did that. Instead, I would do it and think, nothing. What is the point of this? So I did heal from Lyme disease, but I was still very tired. I was still exhausted from it. And I moved from New York to LA. I had a job, but I had just been let go of that job. And I was 30, I was like 38 about. And I had to give up writing because I couldn't write when I had Lyme disease, because it was eating my brain, which probably was why I couldn't think of any words. Like I thought I had writer's block, and I'm like, come on, Theo, you're not enough of the writer's block thing. But I literally couldn't think of. There was a time where I couldn't speak. So I was having trouble writing, and I was a writer, so that kind of sucked. And I was just, I was suddenly back home, away from New York, looking for work in my late 30s, not being able to do what I loved, which was write and like hopefully direct, like go in that direction. My brain wouldn't even work enough. So I felt like I was useless, and I didn't have the energy to do anything about it. So I wasn't contributing to society. I wasn't happy. I was super exhausted all the time. And things were just dark, it was just a dark period because I didn't have I was very apathetic, no energy. I mean, what was I going to do? And then this just you caught it, luck, I don't know, a blessing, somewhere in between. I was offered this opportunity to learn Vedic meditation. I didn't even ask at first. I didn't even care what it was. I didn't care what Vedic meditation was. I just knew it was different, and I hadn't tried it yet. And I thought, well, maybe this could work. I really hope this changes things. And it worked like gangbusters. And then slowly, I wasn't out of the woods yet. There was a bunch of dark stuff that happened after that, and it was kind of slow going. But I noticed that as time went on, my mind didn't feel so much like Swiss cheese. I was getting a little bit more energy. As you know, stress only comes out during deep rest. And I hadn't had deep rest in about, almost 10 years. So I was finally getting some deep rest, and I think some healing that hadn't been done started happening in the physiology, and also that translated to my emotions and my moods. And I started, it's like the sun started coming out again. And I thought, okay, this is promising. And the knowledge was key to that. It was great to learn this, but the knowledge really became the aspect that I started focusing on. And remember, it wasn't to be, I didn't need to be some Vedic know-it-all. I just didn't want to be depressed again. So I just found myself always at Tom's meetings trying to remember, like, okay, that's good. I need to write that down. And I just have notes and notes and notes and notes from all of those years where, and after a while he would I remember one after like 2 years of this, I was at a group med that he was giving, and he just gave me this look, and I got up and went and got him water. And I remember thinking, how did I know he wanted that? I'm like, I think I'm in a new, like, something's going on. And then I put it down next to him, and there was a little relationship starting there because he couldn't get rid of me. And he would say something, and I would be howling with laughter, and there's like 30 other people just looking at him like this. I was starting to really appreciate his sense of humor. So, yeah, it was a dark time, and I like it when people learn in those dark times, because it gives them that contrast of that nothing's working kind of mentality to, holy shit, I'm sleeping again, or I didn't get mad at traffic, or I feel rested, and then they think, wait a second, this is worth doing. And then they start to appreciate some of those immediate benefits, but hopefully that gets them to do it twice a day, so they start experiencing those profound cumulative benefits of meditation.
So just one follow-up to that, I guess, is because of the way you might have felt about jyotish, but then you had your reading. Was that being informed, the decision to go and get your reading, because there was a crisis as well? Was there something else that led you to go, well, let me see?
Mm-hmm. That was, I just wanted to understand how it worked. I'm a Scorpio rising. Scorpios, they like holes, as in wormholes. They like knowledge. They're natural researchers. So a lot of detectives are Scorpios. A lot of researchers are Scorpios. And Scorpios, uneducated Scorpios, will just go down Wikipedia, wormholes. You know what I mean? So there was something. Oh, okay. There's one other thing. So I'm a screenwriter, and I had quit after I had a nasty thing happen where I sold a script, which should be a really good thing, but it was one of the worst things that ever happened to me. So I kind of wanted to quit writing for a while, but then I got this idea for a screenplay that was about Vedic astrologers. And I didn't think, oh, I have an idea for a movie, but I had an idea for a story that was just sort of, it just kept turning in my head year after year. And it started during teacher training in Bali. And because of that, that was helping me become more interested in astrology, because I was trying to match things up with this idea. And so I found I was getting a lot of readings from Blaine. Most people who get a lot of readings from Blaine are like, they don't know what to do with their life and they don't know how to live it, so they need the astrologer. But I was coming from a completely different approach, and he knew that. And he's very good because he knows I'm a teacher, and he could tell there was a lot of worthy inquiry. So he really took me by the hand and started breaking things down so I could understand it in our readings. And that was feeding my screenplay, which I'd work on. And then, of course, as you know, then you get more questions, and then you have to go back. And suddenly I'm writing this script and becoming these are in the movie, these are the best astrologers in India. Well, how can you write them if you don't know anything about astrology? So they were kind of feeding each other. One, I didn't plan it. It just sort of like kind of developed that way. And now I'm like giving readings. It's one of the weirdest. It's just so weird. Yeah.
So what happened to the screenplay? Is that still kind of being worked on gently in the background, or?
Working on it gently in the back. I'm working on it in the same approach I learned Vedic astrology. Very, very just gentle attention over time. And then there's sometimes there's rushes of work, because I've been working on the outline for 2 years, because it's a one, because I'm a slow worker, and two, because it's just, I don't know. It's if I can get the outline down and nailed, the screenplay will take 3 days. So I'm doing a lot of the back work first, and then like the last part will be super easy.
But that resonates so much, I think, with our listeners, getting in the foundation, getting in a solid foundation to your meditation practice, getting in maybe a solid foundation in terms of your research about which meditation technique you're going to do. Do it properly. And then when you're ready to go, you're ready to go. It just flows, and off you go. Obviously some people fall into it. But I come across quite a lot of people who, they realize that it's going to require a certain amount of effort just to get this in place. And of course, our role as teachers is to make that as easy and straightforward as possible. But yeah, it's an interesting thought. Tell us a little bit about your interest in Dhanurveda, the Vedic martial arts, because in one of your podcasts you were talking about bows and arrows, and in this country, of course, where a lot of our history is based on the Battle of Agincourt, where the famous British bow managed to win the day. I know Tom has a great interest in archery. Did your interest come from him, or was it a parallel interest?
Whoops, hold on, I just got a call, and I had to decline it. No, again. Okay, this is one of those. I always knew, you go visit Tom and he's got bow and arrows in his, around his property, and they have, it says like "do not touch" or else, on that kind of thing. And I always liked archery as a concept. I've never really been that into it, but one of my main characters is an archery champion. So there it is. That's what started it. So now I have to learn Donnervade. Since he's a master of Donnervade, now I have to. I've been, yeah.
But
Suddenly
are you personally picking up a bow and some arrows? Are you
Not
finding
yet.
targets?
I'm bow shopping, actually.
Bow shopping.
I'm bow shopping. I plan on going to meet this. I'm going to go to Copenhagen to meet this guy who he's an incredible archer, and he employs a lot of Donnervade. He can shoot an arrow out of the sky. He can shoot an arrow in half that's on the target, and it's all from him reading Donnervade. So I'm going to try and see if I could track him down. And it's just another area of research. The funny thing is the screenplay may not even ever happen. Maybe I'm just supposed to investigate this stuff, or maybe I'm not even supposed to be a teacher, and being a teacher and an astrologer and an archer is just to get the screenplay done. I have no idea where this is going.
It sounds like a great license to just look into anything you want.
Yeah, and that's it.
It becomes an airline pilot. Yeah, I need to learn.
Right, I was hanging out with my uncle yesterday, my dad's identical twin brother, and we were talking about James Joyce because we were sitting around reading quotes of Finnegan's Wake to each other, and we were laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. And if you've ever opened Finnegan's Wake, you might know why it is incomprehensible. It's just incomprehensible. But he was saying, wait, I think I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, something
James
about
Joyce.
What's that?
James Joyce.
No. It was
Airline pilots.
Yes. No, that's what it was. I was saying how at this point I'm okay abandoning anything if I need to do something else, and I've never felt like that. I'm not looking for a certain kind of success in teaching, although I want success in teaching. I want success in everything. But I guess what I mean is I'm letting happiness be my guide. And if it makes me happy to start researching, how to be one of those guys who puts tar on asphalt in the middle of the highway, then I will. I don't think that's where I'm going to go. But yeah, it's like if you just follow your interests, weird things start to happen. You start to pick up new, interesting skills. And I like going about life that way. I'm not an archer. I'm not an astrologer. I just sort of and I'm not an archer yet. I just know Donnervade is next. I know that's sort of starting to well up inside me. And since I know myself, I can kind of see how this is going to go over the next few years. Bow and arrow acquisition, target acquisition, a place to shoot.
Maybe you're going to start a little tribe of archers. I mean, you're on the record, Theo, saying that you want to start a cult. So maybe this could be a sort of archery.
That's
cult
my
of some
goal.
sort.
Yeah.
I know you were joking. You were joking when you said that you wanted to start a cult.
I was.
No, we need to make that quite clear.
I have Mars in Scorpio in the first house, and when Mars is in one of his own signs or his exaltation sign, you become the leader of either a small army or a band of thieves. And honestly, both sound pretty good.
Pretty appealing.
Maybe we'll be a thieving band of archers.
Well, you've got your mob connections.
So yeah, it's kind of, that's kind of where I'm at. It feels like in the day-to-day that I'm always bouncing around and not doing anything. But then when I look back, it seems to make a little bit of sense. But teaching is always my main gig. I'd rather teach than do anything else. I'd rather teach than write or do anyone's chart, or I think that's where I'm the most useful. But when I'm not doing that, it's great fun to look at charts. and to dream about splitting an arrow in half.
So, staying on the topic of teaching, I'm just curious, and I've asked a lot of our guests a similar question. If any, what gift would you say the pandemic has brought to you, either in terms of the way that you teach or how you want to move forward, or even not just that, what's interesting for us in particular with this method that we have to teach in person? And I know for me, just graduating in 2019 and then a year later, kind of feeling like the rug got pulled out from underneath me was actually a blessing in a lot of different ways, because it opened my awareness to discover a lot of things that I didn't know was out there. So I'm just curious for you, having been a teacher for so long and then coming up against that situation where the whole world is simultaneously experiencing this, change in demand or expectation. Is there a gift or something that it offered you in terms of the way that you view teaching?
Maybe not in the way that I viewed teaching, but I really enjoyed starting this Vedic book club, and that seemed to resonate with people because it gave me a chance to teach online without teaching what we can't teach online, and helping people through some of that knowledge and exposing people to knowledge and to Vedic mythos, and being the organizer of that. I think that was the coolest thing about last year. I found a way, and it was just an idea. I thought, well, I'll do this book, and maybe 10 or 12 of my nerdy colleagues will join, and that'll be super fun. And our first book club had 80 people, and not that they all stay with it, but it was still like, oh, it was great to sort of connect with the broader community, and in a time when everybody was feeling like they needed community, to be able to do that for one common thing that also had to do with what we do, because our first book was The Science of Being, Art of Living. And even though that's almost as the first read through of that is almost incomprehensible as Joyce or Jyotish, it still got people's feet wet and gave them the exposure. And it was so healing to see all those faces too. To see my friends in Australia and all over the world it was great. And I think that helped with my teaching, ultimately. Everything does. Vedic astrology has made me a better teacher. I know it. Doing book club has made me a better teacher. And it's nice to feel this job is so, in a way, it's very easy what we do, but it's so fun to be good at it. It is so fun to be good at it. And most of us are, but when you've been at it for a while and it starts to flow, and you're like, okay, that's, class is over and no one leaves, like, okay, like it's nice to feel that you're really helping. And I think the Vedic book club, it was very validating for me. It was very healing to see just my friends, but to have the response that I did, where people were eager to get in it, and they're eager to get back to it. I've been putting it off again, but we're going to do Maharishi's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita next, and we're going to start in August. And that book is the reason I started this. I just didn't want to start with that book, but that's the one.
You started with Ulysses instead of Finnegan, which is almost hard.
So I think that was it. I think doing that, it helped in a lot of different ways. It helped not just me, but it seemed to be something where everybody can come together and have a big shared experience online that was the Vedas, but that wasn't, messing with the purity of the teaching.
Beautiful. I mean, I would say, I think the three of us would agree that's why this and how this podcast came into being, was we were trying to satisfy a need for our audience and our students and our community, that wasn't really around, especially because we couldn't do what we were doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I look at it, and having you here, and all of the things that we're talking about, and getting to share with other people. I don't know that we would have done that. I don't know that a lot of us, if we could have continued in the world normally meeting, that we would have gone online and we would have brought people together in all of these ways. So
Yeah. And I think that's the other one. I got to say, the podcast that I started, because I've always wanted to start a podcast, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know the approach. I didn't know with who. I didn't know. I just knew I wanted to. And then I taught Brienne. And once I met her, she started asking questions, and she just never stopped asking. And she's so smart and lovely and fun to hang out with that it was just a, it was easy. And her husband's a producer. So it was like, we had the technical side because we were blowing it technically, just blowing it. But yeah, I really liked that that podcast came out of the pandemic too. And that's been a lot of fun.
And you pleased a lot of animal lovers because you have your occasional guest, Hank the dog.
Yeah.
He just kind of pops in once in a while and makes a contribution.
Yeah, that's right. Hank is always around.
That's good. That's good. You were talking about the kind of purity of the teaching. And I think, to follow on from Derrick's question, one of the things that I think we've all become aware of in the last 18 months is how this pandemic has challenged some of the integrity of the teaching and some of the people who are examining other ways to teach. What are your views on that?
Well, I think that I have, a lot. Some of these people who do that are my friends, and I think, and there's different degrees of it. I think in some cases, I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I believe that I've been a purist since I started. I don't think I've done anything. I haven't deliberately done anything out of step. But I just look at Tom. I mean, I just look at Tom and think, do more of that. Do what he does. If he ever texts me or calls me, which he has, and said, hey, and gives little suggestions or little hints or little, like he's reined me back once, very sweetly. I said something about, I was giving someone a mantra upgrade, and he said, let's call it first advanced technique, because that's a little misleading. And I went into my website and changed it. I'm happy for that kind of stuff, but I really look at him because he was the closest to Maharishi out of all of us. He's doing exactly what Maharishi told him, and I think, why innovate something that's been around for a long time? But at the same time, I think there's another thing that's happening where some of the people who do follow the purity of the teaching are ostracizing and banishing their own friends and colleagues because they're not doing it that way. And I don't like that either. I have a strong distaste for colleagues of mine who suddenly stopped talking to other colleagues because they did something a little different. I have love for all my colleagues, and I may not agree with all of them, but I'm not going to turn my back on anyone because they, I heard someone didn't do puja. What I do is I tell them, well, here's why you should do puja. It's not just because you're robbing someone of an experience, but I'll gently coach, if they're open, my colleagues who are doing something different, if they're open to it. If not, I just love them, but I'm not going to turn my back on them. But that's a growing thing right now in our community. There's some people who are just completely shunning other people, and I just think, I don't know if that works either. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll probably shake out. I think we're in a very stressed situation that, and once we kind of get back to working, it'll kind of soften out and even out, and perhaps people have got a little bit too much time on their hands to be thinking and considering what their colleagues are doing, rather than spending time concentrating on their own business and their own affairs.
Bingo.
That'll probably be the way it is. So Theo, we've just coming up to the hour. It's been a complete delight having you as our guest. We've touched on so many interesting and varied topics. You're a man of many talents, many facets, and we've greatly enjoyed having you. And I'm sure our audience will enjoy this. If people want to get in touch with you and find out a little bit more about you, what's the best way? What are your kind of platforms?
I guess follow me on Instagram, which is my handle is BTHEO, which it is right here. And then go to my website, ThéoBurkhardt.com. You'll if you can't figure out how to spell it, then you'll
Ask
never.
me.
And listen. And if you haven't heard "Slouching Towards Enlightenment," listen to that. It's fun.
Okay, thanks for sticking around till the end. We hope you found the conversation stimulating, and it might have raised some questions of your own. We'd like to hear about them. This season, we want to engage with you, our audience, and would love to know what topics and themes would be of interest to you. Also, would you like to be our guest? Perhaps you might be interested in coming on the show and talking with us. We'd love to have you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us with a direct message on our Instagram account. And for those of you who are not camera shy, please feel free to share a video with the hashtag #TheVedic Conversation.